Okay, so this is one of those webinars that I get some ideas about just over the course of, talking to practices day in and day out and people struggling with the same types of issues. And then I start putting together a presentation that keeps getting longer and longer and longer. So I'm going to give you a ton of information tonight, and then we will actually have a second part to this webinar in the next couple weeks or so. There's just too much content, and I want you to all be able to kind of absorb it, think about it, especially over the long holiday weekend. Think about just making a few little changes maybe next week when you get back. So again, welcome to the What Are You Waiting For Practice Engagement Program webinar. It is Wednesday, June 29th, 2022. Okay, so here are some of the common responses and reactions to making changes and improvements. There's too much going on. I know the situation is bad, but I just can't right now. Maybe we could try that during the slow season. So I have a practice that I've been working with for about 8 years. We do monthly reporting, little tweaks. We, go through when there's problems and we fix them as they go, but we're still waiting for the slow season to happen. So that's not a good excuse. I'm afraid if I ask the staff to make any changes or add to their plates, they will quit. That is a very common response right now. So even the junk drawer can be transformed with a little effort. And think about that. Everybody has the quote junk drawer in their home, but it can be very organized. I am the queen of ordering every type of battery under the sun on Amazon, just in case I ever run out. And I do have like very specific places that all my batteries and even the weird ones that I probably will never use in my life, they go in the junk drawer. So fear of what may be uncovered when we look more closely is a big hindering factor in practice improvement for many doctors and administrators. And not knowing where to begin is the biggest reason or most common excuse not to. So Zig Ziglar says, you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great, which is a really, really great quote. So those of you that know me that have worked with me for, a short time or a long time, you know that I like analogies, I like metaphors. I like to put things in perspective. So my suggestion here, and this is how we're going to start off this whole topic, divide your practice into slices of pie, or in this case, a cheesecake. Okay, so no matter where you live, you have a BJ's or a Sam's Club or a Costco or whatever it is. They have those variety cheesecakes. Okay, so like this one here, and I feel like there are some that offer like 12 or 14 when they're really skinny slices, different flavors. I feel like that's too much variety. But this one here, just is divided into 6 different types of cheesecake with 2 slices of each, which I feel like it's good because then you don't feel bad about being the only person that took, the chocolate one or whatever. So in this example here, 6 different flavors. So let's divide your practice into 6 areas or aspects, using like the patient flow as our guide. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So area or aspect number 1, we're calling the search. Okay, so an individual or potential patient has a foot or ankle problem and turns to Google. Maybe they type heel pain or foot doctor near me or foot pain. What comes up on the top of the page? On page 1, following their search, are they directed to your website and social media pages easily? Is your site mobile friendly, or are the words splayed oddly across their phone? Can they easily click through to call the office or send a message for appointment scheduling? I don't know about any of you, but it aggravates me to no end where there's a website where the phone number is not clickable. And then what? You're supposed to keep switching back and forth and remember the phone number, and it's totally aggravating. Is your website ADA compliant? If not, get it compliant. It has to have that little handicap symbol or you will be fined big time. Is all your physician and practice information correct and the same across the web? Google yourself and see, because it may list an old address from 10 years ago. It may have you as a middle initial in one and not the other. So check that. Did they miss your website completely because it was too far down on page 1 or worse on page 2 or 3 or beyond? Or did they go to click and change their mind because you have barely any or outdated reviews? So if you're trying this right now for yourself and don't like what you see, do something about it right away. Utilize marketing firms that have experience with podiatry practices. I don't know why, but a lot of marketing website companies that work with dental practices feel that they know exactly what to do for you. And I don't know why that they make that correlation between dentists and podiatrists. The only thing I can think of is a similar type of treatment chair, but I'm not sure. But if you have to provide them all the information and all the content, I mean, why not just build it yourself? If a family member or friend of a friend offers to do it, like build your website, yeah, weigh other options. Make sure you own your domain name, okay? Because if your website provider bought it for you, then you are hostage to them if you want to leave. Once your website is established, you cannot stop there. We're in the digital age. Online presence matters, updated and accurate information matters, privacy and security matters, and reviews and reputation management matters a lot. If you do not have a marketing strategy, you get what you get, so don't be upset, meaning the types of patients, conditions, insurances that you walk through your door. You need to market to the patient's demographic areas, conditions, and insurances that you want to treat. A lack of strategic targeting leads to schedules filled with routine foot care and limited space for new patients. And there's always one or two on these webinars that I know say, I really like routine foot care and I like that my schedule is filled with it. And I say, kudos to you, to the DPMs who relish in debriding nails and calluses all day, every day. But for the rest, the search may be the first aspect of your practice in needs of some tweaking. Now let's move to area number 2, initial communications. So congratulations, your practice has been selected as the lucky recipient of an appointment request from the previously mentioned individual with a foot or ankle problem. The question now becomes, does he actually become a patient? That depends. How did this patient, his name is Pat, try to communicate? So many of my practices are using plugins or apps in conjunctions with their website that allows patients to request appointments and intake paperwork securely ahead of their visit. These work amazingly well if someone in the practice is monitoring them. But if no one is checking, like one of my practices last week very sadly discovered, the person that was in charge of checking this platform had not been checking it and had not been checking it for months. So if no one's checking, you may be losing boatloads, I mean boatloads of new patients or potential new patients. So like with any technology incorporated to help improve efficiency, increase new patient volume, or otherwise, there's always ownership on the practice or business or individuals to be checking on it. So let's talk about Pat. Pat is our potential patient. Pat is a 42-year-old postal worker who has been suffering with pain in his left heel for months. Each morning as he steps out of bed and hobbles to the bathroom, like he's 75 years old, his wife asks him when he is going to make an appointment to see the foot doctor he found online. Pat usually grumbles something back about short staffing at the post office and not being able to take time off. Later that morning, which happens to be a Friday, Pat's wife texts to remind him that the following Monday is Juneteenth, meaning he has the day off. She also includes emojis of a foot, a doctor, and a kissy face, which are all important emojis to include if you're a passive-aggressive wife. So during his lunch break, Pat pulls up your bookmarked website and clicks through to call. That's good that works. As it is 12:30, he expects to leave a message on a voicemail or an answering service. On the second ring, he is pleasantly surprised to hear an actual person say, "Good afternoon, Avid Foot and Ankle Center. This is Jane. How can I help you today?" Pat answers, "Hi, Jane. My name is Pat Williams, and I have been suffering with pain in my left heel for months. My wife just reminded me that I have Monday off, and I know this is a long shot, but is there any way the doctor could see me that day?" The question Was Jane trained to properly triage patients? And I mean, not just according to medical necessity, but also by impact on the practice. So even though the schedule may be, quote, full, and Pat's heel pain would not be categorized as an emergent condition per our, quote, triage, does Jane realize the impact that squeezing in this patient can have on the bottom line of the practice financially and in terms of creating long-term relationships with patients who are well taken care of and who refer friends and family for years? Let's say yes. Let's say that this is a Pinnacle practice and they work with me and I train their staff to triage according to medical necessity and practice impact. So yes, Jane was trained. So Jane smiles through the phone because you can hear that and says to Pat, let's see here. We do have a pretty full schedule on Monday, but we understand how important it is to accommodate patients in need. Why don't you come in at 2:30 and we'll do our best to get you back to meet with the doctor as efficiently as possible. Pat is once again pleasantly surprised and thanks Jane for being so kind. Jane then begins scheduling Pat's appointment, collecting the essential insurance and demographic information in order to perform a real-time eligibility check while on the call and to later obtain benefit details. So before ending the call, Jane asks or requires Pat to pre-register. Jane says, our practice requires all new patients to complete the registration process ahead of their visit. This includes additional demographic, medical, social, family, and medication history. Because your appointment is approaching on the next clinic day, you will need to complete your online registration packet and submit it back by 4 p.m. today. Or instead, our new patient coordinator can call you between 3:30 and 5 this afternoon to perform a 15-minute interview. Most of our patients prefer the interview as there's no downloading and printing of forms or filling in pages of required fields. This allows us to keep patient wait times to a minimum and to fit in patients as soon as possible. I'm sure you can appreciate that. Pat chooses the pre-visit interview as he's home from work by 3:30. Jane promptly places Pat on the new patient coordinator schedule, makes a note that he is usually home by 3:30, and repeats back the preferred phone number. Pat is happy and can't wait to tell his wife the good news. So I'm going to ask you, are you going above and beyond to schedule new patients as soon as possible and to expedite their visits? If not, you may want to begin your kind of cleanup and improvement with area or aspect number 2, initial communications. There is more information on the new patient coordinator role available in the practice engagement program library. Once you implement this role or concept, you and your team will never want to go without it. Now let's move to area or aspect number 3, which is scheduling. So taking a step backwards, how did Jane know where to squeeze Pat into Monday's already full schedule? Well, maybe she didn't. Maybe she just wanted to mess with her clinical coworkers, or she's upset with the doctor for making her work on Friday afternoons in the summer. I don't know. Or maybe this practice has a scheduler or system that allows for add-ons without causing complete chaos. And that makes sense from a total time and room rather than with the doctor perspective. And with that, I will tell you that views matter. And I'm not just talking about from your deck or backyard. So a 2-column scheduler, I mean 2 columns per provider, or a 1-column scheduler that was very specific blocks, allow more methodical appointment placement and room for these add-ons, okay? So on the left side here, we have a 2-column scheduler. And so as you can see, we have certain blocks of time for new patients. New patients are blocked for 45 minutes, which some of you must be saying, oh my goodness, that's way too much time and I could never do that. Well, if you're blocking a new patient for 45 minutes out of the hour, that means you have room to see also 4 established patients alongside during that same hour. So if you do it in a way that when you look at the schedule, you and the staff can visualize, okay, the new patient's going to be in room 1, the medical assistant's going to be in there, going to be evaluating, taking x-rays, setting up a procedure, getting ready for me while I'm in with 1 established patient and maybe 2 during that time. I go in with the new patient, the medical assistant cleans a room, brings in another established. When I leave and go in with the next established, the medical assistant goes and finishes up. So this works off the premise that you as the doctor are in the middle only of this visit. On the right side, we have a 1-column scheduler. So this to me is not visually the best for the staff. And staff gets used to anything. You get used to looking at anything, but this just has like, there's 2 post-ops scheduled in a 10-15 slot. So that means it could be stressful if, say, you were short-staffed, if both of those patients needed x-rays at the same time, if they both showed up exactly at the same time for their 10-15 appointment, which, you know, hardly ever happens. But then this also has a little emergency slot booked alongside a new patient appointment. So either way, we need to allow for time for add-ons and to kind of squeeze in these patients that are very valuable to the practice. So it can be stressful to look at a schedule and not be able to visualize who goes where. Okay, so this is a 2-column scheduler that I made for a practice years ago, and they wanted to see a ton of patients a day. They wanted to see, you know, 50 patients a day or whatever it was, which I just think is too much, but this is how it's set up. Also know that in this area where the practice is, they know that they have an extremely high no-show rate. So for them kind of stacking patients like this all day, every day, it doesn't necessarily turn out to be chaos because they know how many patients are not going to show up on average. But the same thing, every new patient, it's a new patient or a longer visit for 45 minutes is scheduled alongside with 3, potentially 4 established. And then we have 2 catch-up slots in the morning, which could be catch-up or a new patient add-on or a little emergency. And then we have 3 catch-up slots in the afternoon. So keep in mind that the last new patient in the morning would be scheduled at 11. The last new patient in the afternoon would be at 3:45 if they wanted to be done at 4:45 or 5 o'clock. Please reconsider the amount of time allowed for all commonly seen patient types and conditions. So again, times should be allotted by the number of minutes the patient is in the room. The patient is physically in that treatment chair, not with a capital NOT, how long the doctor is. Doctor should be, again, I'm saying it, in the middle of the visit only. So plan accordingly. This type of scheduling is discussed in more detail in my previous webinars and is referred to as the table turnover theory, like in a restaurant. Let's move on to area or aspect number 4 called pre-gaming. All right, collecting accurate demographic and insurance information throughout the scheduling process allows us to gather as many details as possible prior to patient arrival. All EHR and practice management systems are able to check eligibility and benefit information to some extent. However, the amount of detail, accuracy, and interface with smaller payers varies. At the bare minimum, though, we should be verifying that the patient has active coverage at each and every visit. Please be aware of, quote, active coverage results with Medicare patients. So if you have some systems that the system is checking it automatically for you 24, 48 hours ahead of the visit every single time, those Medicare patients are going to come up green, which means good, which means go. Every patient that's 65 that has a red, white, and blue card, yes, they do have active Medicare coverage, but it doesn't mean they don't have a replacement plan, and that's who we should be billing. And that is a big source of denials, and the patients are confused and the staff is confused, and patients can re-enroll a couple times a year, and it makes it very messy. But you have to go above and beyond and actually go into the Medicare portals, and it will tell you, nope, the patient has something else. And then you need to call the patient and figure out, say, you know, Mildred, please empty out your wallet. Let me just tell me what all the cards are. And she'll give you her Costco card ID number and she'll give you all of it. But eventually you'll get there. Okay. Replacement plans cause many headaches, meaning denials due to alternative coverage. Taking a few more steps following verification of coverage, I mean, the bare minimum, will serve your practice wallet and your patients well. They say the devil is in the details, and this is especially true with insurance benefit details. We need to know the copay amount as deemed by the insurance for a specialist, even though your patients argue with your front desk all the time that you're just a podiatrist, you're not a specialist, but yes, in fact, you are. if they have a deductible and how much has been met, if they have coinsurance or other out-of-pocket expenses, if their plan requires a referral, actual authorization number to see a specialist, if we are in network with that specific plan, and this has become a headache too, you know, you think that you're contracted with Cigna or Aetna or whatever, and more little obscure plans come out, and then the patient's looking through their directory and it says we are an in-network provider, but just so happens like not really with their little plan. So why is this extra information so important? Because no one likes surprises, especially in the form of a bill, because there is an actual No Surprise Act. And you received an email about it from me a few months ago with a sample letter for you to send out. So please feel free to edit it and use it. It's also in the library. Because in order to follow your practice financial policy and keep patients informed to the best of your knowledge, according to the detailed information provided during this pregame process by their insurance company, you must know what to collect at the time of service and then actually collect it. And because if a patient refuses to pay something towards their deductible or argues that their PCP bills them for their copay, they will most likely ignore statements following claim submission and the EOB showing patient responsibility exactly as it did when you checked benefit details prior to them coming in, or call and ask you to rebill it. Okay, that's really not a thing. A deductible is a deductible. Such an important detail that is often missed. I can't tell you how many times we've figured this out with you know, billers and billing companies and managers and doctors. And it's just this simple little thing. But when a patient is seen the first time in the calendar year, make sure to take a clear copy or scan of the front and back. All this is capitalized. And I really don't like to you know, print like this in all caps, but this is so important. The front and back of their insurance card or cards. And it has to be clear. I've seen lots of like copies where it's the pages is all crumbled up and it's sideways and like the ink is low. Just scan it, like move into this century and please scan it front and back. So the patient can have an identical card from last year, but it can have a change of payer ID. Okay, so the payer ID is that electronic number of where we're submitting the claim electronically, and without the correct payer ID, you will not get paid and you will chase that claim forever. So moral of the story, a little more work on the front end means a lot less pain in the backside. I just kind of came up with that today. I thought that was pretty good. All right, speaking of financial policies, when was yours last updated? And I found this little picture of Betsy Ross making the first American flag. So if it's been a while, just keep in mind that we are now halfway through the year. So halfway through the year or the beginning of the year is a good time to update any policies that take effect, you know, the beginning of the next half. So it may be a good time to instate an updated policy that says effective July 1st, 2022. Be as clear as possible and provide places for patients to initial all the way down. You have a better chance that they're actually going to read it other than if it's just a big blurb. Okay. So here's an example created from one of the many office form samples in the PPA resource library. I have a chat question. Oh, it says we updated this month. Perfect. You're ahead of the game. All right. So if we go through this really quick, I want you to be on the side of the patient against the big bad insurance companies, of which you are, okay? So we want to tell the patient very clearly, your insurance policy is a contract that exists between you and your insurance company. Our relationship is with you, the patient, and not the insurance company. If you have any questions about your policy, please call the phone number provided on the back of your insurance card. The patient or responsible party is responsible for their bill being paid in full. Please inform us at every visit of any changes to your insurance coverage. Okay, then it says, please initial each line indicating your understanding of our policies. First one is copayments. It is a requirement of your insurance company that we collect your copayment. Payment is required before meeting with the doctor. Second one, deductibles and co-insurance. If you have a high deductible plan, we may collect a $125 deposit to apply towards your deductible and coinsurance. Any remaining balance after submission to your insurance company is your responsibility. So yes, I have arguments all the time with managers and billers about this, but look, most people, myself including, we are not the greatest at doing math. And I can almost guarantee you that no one that is logged in live right now has access to all of their fee schedules from every insurance company. And if you do, you are an anomaly, because 99.9% of practices do not, and it's like herding cats, but worse, to get a hold of them. Okay. So by doing this flat rate deductible deposit, we are collecting $125. If it's big, it hasn't been met. Okay, we're collecting $125 deductible deposit plus their copay. And then, it says we may, so that amount may go down for subsequent visits, but you're still going to do your orthotic deposit separately. If you have a DME deposit, you're going to do that separately, but it's something. Okay, and then we just keep it in there and it's unapplied until the EOB comes back. Self-pay, obviously, it's due at the time of service. So you need a self-pay fee schedule. If a patient calls and says, I don't have insurance, or you don't accept my insurance, how much is it to just walk in the door? You need to tell them. In order to meet with the doctor for an initial evaluation and management, it's $150 or whatever it is, but they need to be given, this is part of the No Surprise Act, the minimum amount that they'll be responsible for. And then once they get there and you determine what they need, x-rays, a walking boot, an injection, strapping, whatever, then you will tell them before you do it and let them decide if they want to pay. Referral, obviously, if your insurance plan requires one, we need it in place or we can reschedule. No show. Okay, failure to present for your appointment. 24 hours notice is required for cancellation of your appointment, and failure to do so will incur a $50 fee. Failure to provide 24 hours notice for a scheduled office procedure will incur a $100 fee. Okay, so think about this. $50 may seem high to you, but I would take and make your no-show rate the average of your copays. And I've seen copays lately up to $100. So make it worth your patient's while to come back in, even if they're doing a little bit better. Because if they're doing better, sometimes they don't show up because they're like, nah, I have a $40 copay. I really don't want to go pay it. So if they have a $40 copay, they don't want to go pay it. We're going to charge them $50 if they don't give us 24 hours notice. And then I think it makes sense to do a $100 fee on an office procedure. Surgery cancellation, failure to provide 5 business days notice before surgery will incur a $500 fee. Okay, so this is not for, Mrs. Jones goes for her pre-op physical and like is determined that her A1C is like 12 point whatever, and she's not going to have surgery. This is someone got a last minute deal on a cruise in 3 weeks. And so obviously they don't want to be laid up after their bunionectomy. Okay, balances, collection fees. If payment of an outstanding balance is not received within 30 days from the postmark date of a mailed statement or e-statement timestamp, a $10 re-billing fee will be added to each additional statement. Our patient portal offers the ability to view statements and submit payments conveniently and securely. Patients with balances more than 90 days overdue will be turned over to collections, and a $35 administrative fee will be applied. Talk to your billers, your billing company, and see how to do this. FMLA disability medical records, a $25 charge for having the doctor complete these forms. This amount can be higher. Request forms will be completed within 72 hours. There's a $15 fee to obtain a copy of your medical records. Again, charge whatever you want, but please, please, please be consistent. Okay. Please be aware, this has happened throughout the years and it's happened very recently. Certain insurance carriers have language buried deeply in your contract that addresses patient payments to you at time of service. So that collecting of deductible deposits, I don't recommend doing it for Medicare or Medicare replacement or Advantage plans. You cannot do it for Medicaid plans. So these may include Medicare Advantage or replacement plans who do not allow collection of deductible amounts ahead of claim submission and response, and private carriers who claim you cannot collect any amount towards unmet deductible ahead of claim submission, but encourage keeping credit cards on file. Interesting. So a few more points regarding your financial policy. Please enforce what it says. like the late cancellations, no-shows, filling out forms, collecting copays and deductible deposits. Make sure every team member, not just the people who check patients in and out and collect money, have read and understand the policy. Can they answer patient FAQs regarding the details of your policy? Do they have scripts? There is an entire section related to scripting for these types of questions, as well as every other aspect of your practice in the Pinnacle Resource Library. It is titled Scripting for DPMs and Staff. There are also 2 complete webinars on scripting that have proven to be invaluable to those who attended live or viewed them later. So let's go back for a minute to those credit card on file. Do you encourage or make it a requirement for your patients to keep a card on file? Of course, you have to store it securely and compliantly. Do you have a separate policy and form for patients to read and fill out, or an FAQ sheet? Here are an example of both. Again, available in the library. There's the credit card on file agreement on the left, and on the right, it is frequently asked questions regarding the credit card on file agreement. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing. It's here. If you are a subscriber, you have access to this recording as well as the PDF after the webinar. Have you considered change of credit card processing and associated fees? So many businesses have begun passing the buck to patrons. You see it all the time: restaurants, retail stores, and of course, gas stations. Gas stations have always done this, right? On the left, it says cash price. On the right, it says credit price. So I do have some practices that are doing this, and they're tacking on fees to patients who want to use credit cards. Are you making sure that payments are processing? Are your staff members properly trained on collecting money? Cash transactions. Do you keep a bank or make change? So if someone comes in and they owe $47 and they hand you $50, where do you get the $3 from? So make sure you have a bank, make sure that's checked, make sure you have a backup bank, and that only certain people have access to it. Personal checks. Do we know who patients should make the check out to? Maybe you have a DBA and that's not who your check should be written out to. Most of your younger employees don't know how to write a check. So maybe you have a little stamp that you could hand to the patient. Credit cards. Are they processing through or integrating with your EHR or PM system, or are you using a separate merchant service provider to process payments? Are you settling out the batch at the end of each day to make sure payments are going through to your bank account? That's super important. If you're not doing that, you should be. How are these and all payment transactions recorded in your EHR and practice management system? So if you have a separate terminal and you're running credit cards all day, how are you recording that within the patient's chart? Does it look like you owe money to patients when you really don't? So again, I put these things in here because I've seen them, and if they happen once, they're going to happen again. A patient purchases a cash product at checkout. The front desk assistant processes the credit card payment and asks the patient to sign their copy as printed from the terminal. The assistant then records the payment in the EHR practice management system. What the assistant does not do is input the charge for the cash product. So the result is a credit on the patient's account for the amount of the cash product. Yes, credits happen with overpayments, collecting copays when the EOB tells us there wasn't one for whatever service we provided. But if you have a lot of credits or just negatives or in parentheses next to your aging reports, your patients, something could be very wrong with the check-in, check-out process, or how copays or deposits are recorded or cash products are recorded. And make sure everyone knows that there's a difference between posted payments and applied patients. Okay, so if you have a lot of patient credits and it's not making sense, it could be because there's no charge going in for some of your cash stuff. Another essential step of pre-gaming, it's called the huddle, and it should include all team members and doctors. So front office, I mean administrative, check-in, check-out, and back office clinical team leads should print out the clinic schedule and make appropriate notes in preparation for the team huddle. I mean, everyone together. Some prefer to huddle the afternoon before for the next day, or take the clinic day and divide it into sessions, meeting at the end of the day for the next morning and then before lunch for the afternoon patients, which means that your schedule needs to run on time, because it becomes a domino effect. You're trying to prepare for the next clinic session and you're running behind. So, you don't get to it. So Dr. Schreiber says, love the huddle. Our practice lives and breathes by it now. And I knew that you would, like, I hate to say it, Dr. Schweibish, but when I have to force so many practices to do the huddle, and it takes no longer than 10 minutes. Actually, Dr. Schweibish, could you, I'm gonna try to unmute you. Would you mind just kind of like telling us how long it takes you? Because I just feel like people are not doing it because they think it's going to take so long, and it just really doesn't. Okay, I just pressed allowed to talk. There we go. We can hear you.
There we go. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sorry to put you on the spot, but I need you to be like the spokesperson for, we didn't want to do it and now we live by it.
Yeah, no, not a problem at all, Cindy. So let me tell you, ever since you kind of brought it to our attention and to the attention of our staff regarding the, not only the value of the huddle, but also just kind of the critical importance of it, we really do live and breathe by it. And I would say that on average, really depending upon the day and the mix of patients, we probably spend between 5 and 8 minutes on our average huddle. We do ours at the very beginning of the day before even the first patient walks into the waiting room. We've tweaked it over the course of the past several months. But really, what we do now is one person on our staff is assigned to lead the huddle every day. And it's a different person every day. It rotates between the front office and the back office. And that individual, typically the day before, spends time going through the next day's schedule, determining how many patients are coming in for preventative care, how many are post-ops, how many are pre-ops, how many are going to need a procedure, how many are new patients, etc. And just highlighting all the big picture critical elements of that visit for everyone to be aware of. And typically the way that our huddle starts off is highlighting the back office information, procedural things and what things need to be prepared and who might need an x-ray or whatever. And it concludes with our front office discussing any pertinent financial details like, hey, this patient is a patient who has a plan where we need to collect the deductible, or this patient is self-pay, or this patient is going to be paying a big balance that's due, or whatever it might be. And in that 5 to 8 minutes, we answer so many questions that prior to doing the huddle, if people would be scratching their heads, they'd be looking for the practice manager, and it consumed so much time that we've now been able to consolidate into such a narrow window of time.
I mean, it's funny because my next slide talks about like an example of what you talk about. And some practices are like, well, that only needs to be the clinical staff. But no, it has to be everyone because it's a domino effect. One thing affects the other. The other thing too, to add to that, is some of these schedule changes that practices are making, either funneling so that they're doing like routine foot care Friday mornings or like Medicaid Wednesday afternoons or whatever they're doing. If they're making some schedule changes, even the double columns, like I was showing before, it would be good during those periods of time to meet after clinic hours and say like, okay, well, we tried these kind of patients back to back and that didn't work out so well. And let's make sure that we're not, booking 2 teenage boys with ingrown toenails at the same exact time, because that's going to hold up 2 rooms forever in the afternoon and we need to keep moving. So having some post huddles too, after you make some changes, really helps also. But thank you, Dr. Schweibish, for sharing that. That was great.
Of course.
Unmute you. Thank you. All right. So examples of huddle discussion, and this is just to piggyback on what Dr. Schweibish was saying. Patient Smith has an appointment at 10:45 this morning and has a balance of $148.35. A remainder after deductible deposit and copays were collected at time of service from his last 2 visits of 2021. Several statements were mailed with no response. When the patient called last week for an appointment, he was reminded of his balance and instructed to arrive with his insurance card, past due balance, as well as his copay and deductible deposit. Otherwise, he will not be seen. So this is important to know, because if you're one of those doctors who looks out in the waiting room and looks in the treatment room all day, like, what's going on? Where is everybody? It would be important for you to know that if Paul Smith comes in at 10:45 and he shows up with no money, we're going to send him away. And so we already discussed that. Patient Mullins, the 9:30 a.m. is returning for a follow-up of right heel pain. According to the plan of our first encounter, she refused all the doctor's recommendations, medical grade inserts, night splint, topical analgesic, injection. She should be asked specifically about her progress or lack thereof and current symptoms so the previous care plan can be reviewed again or alternative treatments can be introduced. And 11:30, patient Greenberg's husband passed away in early March. Please be extra empathetic to her. I mean, little things like that. Please remind your patients. Reminder systems have been automated for years and should be utilized whenever possible, okay? But I still want you to call your new patients separately because these are the most valuable in the schedule and leave large gaps when they don't show up. So between making the appointment, going through the pre-visit interview, and a call to remind them one more time, they're pretty committed to showing up. Never assume any automated system is working correctly. Don't just set it and forget it. Put team members or doctors on the schedule periodically and pay attention to the text or email or phone call and how you have it set for preferences. Is it clear? Is it easy to confirm or request a reschedule? Or is the system recording your response accurately? Area or aspect number 5 is treating patients. So this is actually a piggyback on before with the pregame. It kind of rolls right in, but we're just going to keep it separate. And then we're going to have kind of in the next webinar, like maybe a 5A and 6. But treating patients seems like a smaller and smaller part of practicing, but it's the doctor and his or her highly trained team's time to shine. So the time to introduce all treatment options, regardless of coverage, the time to educate your patients on the conditions they present with and the wide variety of foot and ankle conditions you can treat, because no one knows what podiatrists do and everyone that's sitting in your waiting room thinks you only treat what they have. Look at your treatment protocols, update them, incorporate all the cash products and services you offer, like the current ones. Take a closer look to see how you can improve patient outcome, regardless of quote coverage. Train all team members on the conditions you treat, what is involved in each common visit type, and to thoroughly understand every cash product and service, how it is used, applied, performed, and how often, the cost, why it isn't covered by insurance, how long until I see results, etc. Again, all of these scripts are available in the resource library. Improving patient outcome while increasing practice income. Think about that thing that you've been talking about buying or leasing for a while. Could be 2 months, could be 5 years. There's always a good reason not to, right? Again, too much going on. We just moved into our new location like 18 months ago. We're still working out the kinks, okay? We're short-staffed and we don't have time to learn something new. If there's anything to take away from this evening's webinar, it's this. There's never going to be a good time to improve if you keep making excuses not to. You either want to do better or you don't. So side note, I'm never contacted to consult with doctors who are drowning, only the ones who are swimming along and want to perfect their breaststroke. Okay, so do the math because numbers don't lie. So if you are hesitating for years about incorporating a provenly effective ancillary service that costs less than $500 a month, I'm just using that as like that's the threshold, and one patient per month would yield at least $500 in revenue, why are you hesitating? Because one patient equals break even, 2 or more, there's the whole rest of the cake for you. So I don't know, with cheesecake and this cake, I don't know, but I think that this is a good analogy. Why are you hesitating about that? One more thought about cash stuff. Look at your price list of cash products and services. How much are you paying for these items? And when was the last time you had a price increase? Everything from custom orthotics to non-covered routine foot care. Everything costs more, and most of my practices are increasing their prices. Not price gouging, but keeping up with inflation, and patients are not balking at it. So again, it's a good time to do it. Price is effective July 1st, 2022. So this is going to be like 5A and 6 will be continued in our next webinar, closing the deal and reputation management and compassionate and effective collections. And as part of that, we will talk about effectively incorporating new staff, training new associates, the shadowing process, how to kind of work through some of the kinks as especially associate physicians try to assimilate into the practice and the practice culture, and it's a very stressful time. We'll talk about the importance of reviews and how to get them. And a really, really important part, compassion and effective collections. And I may have someone that's actually on this webinar tonight, Ashley, who I trained her how to collect money from patients that were years delinquent just by calling and being nice. And she was amazed, and so was the doctor that she manages the practice for, at how much money people will give her over the phone. And I don't know, Ashley, if you're still on here and you want to just say just like a little sneak peek about that, or if you're willing to talk, or if you're willing to get on the webinar and just talk about your method and what you know, your little spiels and your scripts. Oh, you raised your hand. I don't know. Oh, you're still on mute though, Ashley. Can you unmute yourself? I don't think so. Lower hand. That's okay. I'll talk her into it before our next webinar. So stay tuned then for the invite for the next. Oh, she said it won't let me unmute. I want to talk. Ashley, I don't know why it won't let you unmute. It said talking permitted. Asked to unmute. I can promote you to panelist. That might help. There you go. Now you're a panelist, and now you should be able to unmute, Ashley. And don't give too much away. You're still on mute. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, we'll save it for next time. So for those of you who are not active Pinnacle Practices or Practice Engagement Program subscribers, you are definitely missing out. So go to my website, pinnaclepa.com, and click on PEP at the top for more information on exclusive vendor discounts, ever expanding resource library, one-on-one training and consulting. We have 2 monthly webinars. They're all recorded if you can't get on them live. But it's a ton of information and value for really little money. So thank you all for joining me, and stay tuned for the next invite. Thank you so much for everyone who joined me. And yes, I will see you at the national meeting, some of you, in just a few weeks. Actually, they're during the Hall of Fame luncheon. I'm finally going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame from 2 years ago when that meeting didn't happen. So that'll be super fun. And again, thanks for joining me. Happy 4th of July. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I will talk to you all very soon.